So at this point, it's clear that God isn't going to simply save the world, that it's up to human beings to figure out how to save the world for ourselves. The question really becomes, how do we go about doing that? According to tradition, we have two sacred sources to provide guidance. We have the Torah, the sacred words that were transmitted directly to Moses. But we also have a set of oral teachings that, according to the tradition, were passed down from Moses throughout the ages before eventually being written down. So these are the divine teachings themselves, but of course this doesn't really tell us everything we need to know. If you read the Bible, it's got teachings, and we can make of that whatever we will, but we really have to expand on them and understand them in more depth, because real world problems are always more complex than the versions that we get in the Bible. And so we get two different traditions, one based on interpretations of the Torah called Midrash, and the other, which is particularly important in Judaism, is the Talmud, interpretations of the oral teachings. Jewish scholars expend tremendous amount of effort in poring over these texts and the interpretations and the interpretations of the interpretations. There's an image that you can see in the web page where it's color-coded for our benefit. It's not in the original, but you have a core teaching in the middle, and ringed around it are various different interpretations from earliest to latest. And so rabbinic scholars will study these and debate them in pairs. And they'll argue different perspectives and really try and work through the issues. I've put a particularly helpful story to really highlight the point that I've been trying to make, that it's up to human beings to solve problems for ourselves. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You can read the story yourself. But the gist of it is that a bunch of rabbis are arguing about a certain point about what is the right interpretation of ritual law, and they are disagreeing with the interpretation of a rabbi named Eliezer, and God keeps sending these signs to tell the other rabbis that you should really listen to Eliezer. He's got the right idea, and they keep rejecting those signs, and finally God himself comes in with a booming voice and says, why don't you listen to Eliezer? I'm telling you, he really knows what he's talking about. Another rabbi, Joshua, stands up and points his finger up to God and says, it's not in heaven. It's basically saying, this is none of your business. And the interpretation is that God gave us the Torah, God gave us the oral teachings, but it's up to human beings now to figure out what that means and to make our own decisions. And so, as you'll read, that it's up to the rabbis to argue these things out and decide for the community how we should live. And that even when we get it wrong, even when God says that, hey, you're not doing the right thing, it's really not God's place. And it really ties in with the previous theme that I was talking about, where if we don't make these decisions for ourselves, if we just become kind of automatons and God says do this and we just do it, that's not really morality, right? Morality consists of grappling with the issues for ourselves, deciding what is right, and even if we make a misstep, it's our mistake, that we have to work through these issues for ourselves. It's kind of like being a parent and teaching your children. But at some point, you give the lessons, but at some point your children are going to grow up and they have to make decisions for themselves. Sometimes you might think that they're doing the wrong thing, but they have to become adults, and that's really symbolic of how Judaism sees this issue, that the human race as a whole has to go through this process of maturing and eventually will become responsible adults. But we need to do it ourselves, and if God just always intervenes, then it really won't help us to grow into the mature human race that we're supposed to eventually become.